Hi, and welcome to day 2 of the Healing Your Gut challenge. So I hope you enjoyed day 1, which was on leaky gut. Today, we're going to be talking about healthy digestion and what that means and how your digestive system works. So just a reminder on how this is going to work. So at some point in the video, usually towards the end, I'm going to be sharing the secret word, and all you need to do to enter in is to email the secret word to support@healingjourneyservices.com. And what you can win is either a $75 gift certificate, or you can win a Ninja blender, and you get to win 3 months in my membership program. In my membership program, you can order a lot of the tests, really cool functional lab tests. So if you haven't heard of that, ask me below, because I'm happy to talk about the GI map, which is my favorite gut test. I do hair and mineral testing and stress testing, and I do hormone testing. So like a whole bunch of really cool tests that you can access through this membership program. So definitely a super cool prize pack. But let's get on to what we're going to talk about today, which is actually your stomach. So I want to talk a little bit about how the digestive process works. So essentially, actually, you're producing enzymes in your mouth when you first are eating. So even the smell of food, you're going to start salivating, and that saliva actually has enzymes in it. So you start the digestion right in your mouth. But then when you're digesting into your stomach, actually, you are digesting primarily proteins. So in order to digest in your stomach, what you actually need is you need to have a lot of stomach acid production, okay? So you need a lot of stomach acid production to have a low pH in your stomach. So you need your stomach to be highly acidic. And what happens when that pH is low is that it's low enough to start to break apart the bonds in the proteins, and so it helps you to digest the proteins. What low stomach acid is also going to do for you is it is going to absorb B12. So it's really interesting, and what I see a lot of is people who are actually low in B12. And part of the reason they're low in B12 is because they don't have enough stomach acid production to get that low pH to actually be able to absorb the B12 into their bodies. And this is actually part of the reason why some people have moved to vegetarianism that I've talked to, because their body simply can't tolerate meat anymore. So that's what they think, but they're not really sure why. And often what happens is it's because the stomach acid production is actually not enough to be able to break down those meat proteins, those animal proteins, to be able to absorb them properly into their body. So then you become very nutrient deficient. But the second issue is that you're not going to be breaking down your food properly. So then what's going to be happening is this partially digested food is going to start moving through your digestive system. Okay, so it's in the stomach isn't working properly, you're not breaking down your food, so now it's going into the small intestine. So in order for the body to adapt, what happens is the small intestine produces a bacteria called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And this is when your healthy bacteria in your colon transmits or transfers up to the small intestine, or it somehow ends up there. And the role actually becomes quite functional in this case, because it's going to help you to break down that food that your stomach couldn't break down properly. So it's actually fermenting the food for you. But what it's doing at the same time is it's producing a heck of a lot of gas. So I know a couple people said, yesterday when I asked, like, hey, I'm really bloated. And sometimes that bloating comes from that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's good bacteria, but in the wrong place. And when it starts fermenting, you start get super, super gassy. And this is why some people actually, they struggle with milk because the body can't break it down. And so it's being fermented from that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it produces like an insane amount of gas. And then that gas is going to like bubble up out your body. It's going to bubble up out your breath. And actually one of the key tests for SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, is a breath test. So you're actually breathing into these test tubes to see if you're producing this gas when you eat this substance that feeds the gut bugs, okay? So then, you're gonna get this partially digested crappy food, you're gonna feel crappy, and then it's going to head to the colon, and more issues can happen in the colon, right? So you can start to see how it becomes a bit of a loop, right? So it's the mouth, and then the stomach, and then the small intestine, and then actually we need bile production. So bile production is triggered by that stomach acid production, which then triggers the pancreatic enzymes, which then is going to trigger the bile production. And if you don't have enough bile production, then guess what? You're not going to be absorbing your fats properly, because you need that bile to be emulsifying your fats. And so then you're going to have a whole bunch of issues. And so these are the people whose stool floats. So if you have floating poop, you're not digesting your fats very well. These are also the people that may feel nauseous. So I had this issue at one point. I would take that coconut oil. It was like really strong coconut oil, and I would feel so sick, and I just wasn't making enough bile for my body to be able to handle the fats. Okay, so there's lots of different kind of outcomes of us not having enough stomach acid. So this is why I like to focus on this. So there's a couple of reasons why you might not have good stomach acid production. And so one is you could have something called H. pylori. And you may have heard of this. It's a common cause of acid reflux. It can also cause ulcers, and it can also lower your stomach acid production. So here's the interesting thing about H. pylori, and I'm a testament to this. So I tested for H. pylori with a breath test. I did an endoscopy. I also, did a stool test, and I did a blood test, and it all came back negative. And then I did the GI map, and it showed up with virulence factors, okay? And so if your doctor is saying that you don't have it and you have some of the symptoms of it, I wouldn't necessarily trust those tests 100%, because I've seen, H. pylori for people show up on the GI map, but not show up through conventional medical testing. And that was definitely the case for me, for sure. So something to get rid of, when you get rid of the H. pylori, then your stomach acid production can go back up, because the H. pylori likes to live in a very basic environment. It doesn't necessarily like that acidity. And so that is, a reason. And then the other thing is stress, right? Stress is a really big connection. If you're really stressed out, then what's going to happen is your fight or flight, so your sympathetic dominant, right? So you're in that running from the bear mode, because your body doesn't actually know there's not a bear. It just feels like there's a bear. So if your body feels like there's a bear, it's going to start to biochemically react like there's a bear. And let's be honest, if you're being chased by a bear, you're not going to be digesting your food. So your body's going to divert the energy away from digesting food and towards that survival. And digesting food is not a survival kind of activity. So we need the body to be a very calm state to properly digest the food. So if you're stressed because you have metals in your body, if you're stressed because you have gut infections, or if you're stressed because of relationships or job issues or finance issues, all of those things are going to throw the nervous system off and send you into that sympathetic mode. So how can you check for this? So there's a couple of ways to check. So one is you want to check to see that your vagal nerve is being activated. So oftentimes your vagal nerve is going to be stimulating your digestive system. So if you're constipated, you might want to really think about this, but it can also be the other way around as well. So gag reflex is one of the things. So if you can stick your finger down your throat, or they have the tongue scrapers, that's another good thing to stick down your throat, and you're not gagging, chances are your vagal nerve isn't really going to be activated. Okay, so that's one way to tell that your vagal nerve isn't being activated. It's probably the best way. So ways to stimulate your vagal nerve. So this is where it gets interesting. So gagging, yes, it will also stimulate your vagal nerve. And gargling. So this is like we're talking like a hardcore gargle here. So you want to gargle the base of your throat, and you want to do it really loudly, and people might think you're a bit like, woo woo. But that's definitely something that you're going to want to do to stimulate your vagal nerve. And so it's like a muscle, right? So you can't just gargle like once a week and expect that muscle to be activated. You need to gargle 3 times a day really loudly for at least a minute. And there actually can be tears that will start streaming down your eyes when you've really activated that. Ujjayi breath and yoga is another thing. Singing loudly in the shower, in the car is another thing that's going to really stimulate that vagal nerve for you. And so the vagal nerve is that connection between the gut and the brain. It's going to help with stomach acid production. And if you've had a brain injury or if you've had chronic gut issues, then that gut-brain connection can be impacted. So what is my challenge for you today? So my challenge is for you to test your vagal nerve reflex by testing that gag reflex. And if it's off, to try gargling on a regular basis. That's one challenge. The second challenge is to improve your stomach acid. So you can do this by buying bitters. I really like St. Francis bitters or Dr. Shade's bitters number 9. And that's going to be stimulating stomach acid production naturally. Or apple cider vinegar will also do the same thing. So trying that out. Apple cider vinegar can be a bit harsh on the stomach. So if you have a very sensitive stomach, that one might not be for you. So the code for the video is ACID. So email that code to support@healingjourneyservices.com. Again, one more time, that's ACID. So I'd love to hear from you on what you're finding with your gag reflex and also what your stomach is like. Are you seeing, food in your stool? Are you getting that really big bloating? Do you have that acid reflux? Tell me about that and tell me about your discovery with gagging. Yes, there's really weird follow-up. I know it's a weird follow-up, but yeah, so do that. And I just see a question come in. Is it possible H. pylori wouldn't show up on a GI map if other bugs are present? So sometimes it takes a little bit for H. pylori to come up. Sometimes it doesn't always show up on the first test, but H. pylori is actually seen with Epstein-Barr virus, as well as blastocystis hominis. So sometimes if I see Epstein-Barr show up or blasto, then I'm very tuned into looking for H. pylori. And again, this was the case for me. Epstein-Barr, I'm not totally sure about for me, but blasto and H. pylori were kind of hand in hand with me and causing a heck of a lot of issues. So I think no one's really exactly sure why those two pair together, but I think the blasto creates a good environment for the H. pylori. It could be the other way around, but they're definitely paired together. So I can't really see who that is that was asking that, but I hope that got your question. So sometimes on a retest, we'll see it show up more. Yes. Okay. Awesome, Jen. I'm glad I got that. So yeah, but like symptoms are a big thing. The other thing that I didn't mention, Jen, that you might be curious to know that was on my radar for you actually, was Bartonella. So it's a Lyme co-infection. So it's transmitted with tick-borne issues, and it will kind of sit in the myelin sheath for people. And they're finding that, if SIBO becomes untreatable, it doesn't sit in the myelin sheath. It sits, I don't know why I said that. It sits in the stomach, the lining of the stomach, the enteric nervous system, and can cause some issues for people. So that's always on my radar when symptoms aren't necessarily going away, but it does take a while to heal. So you do kind of want to give it a bit of time to heal, but if it's not healing, then that's another thing we can look at too. Okay, so thanks very much for joining me, and I will see you again tomorrow at the same time for another fun chat about healing your gut.